Jane, thank you. So what I'm going to do is try and share my presentation first of all. And in my first click, it's disappeared from my screen, but hopefully you can see my name on a PowerPoint slide.
Yep, all good, thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, thank you very much, Jane, and thank you for the opportunity to deliver a presentation on a service carer's view. So I'm, as Jane says, I'm Ed Gordon, or Lieutenant Colonel Brian Gordon is my official name, and I'm the commanding officer of 225 Medical Regiment in Dundee in Scotland. And today I'm going to give you a sort of a lived experience of a service carer's view, and I'll reiterate that several times because it's my view of what it's like to be a service carer, and everybody's journey is a little bit different. On that thank you that I said earlier to Jane, I want to extend that to everybody else on the line. I think there's about 40 odd people at the moment and 60 people asked to be part of today. And you're here because you care, you're here because you're interested, and you're here because you are people that have touch points with the service community, whatever part that might be, whether that's a serving person of the Army, Navy or Air Force. I will acknowledge the other two services exist, and if you're part of them, I'm sorry for you. You might be a family member, might be a parent, you know, the community is wide and deep. And so without further ado, I will crack on. So on first click, nothing happened. This is an issue, bear with. So Jane, did the slide move to a picture of me looking like a soldier by a river?
It has.
Excellent, because that's me looking like a soldier by a river. So if you were a project manager, you might have heard of the 6 Ys or the 6 Ws, the 5 Ws and 1 H, and think that they're all practice wrong project management tools. But actually, a fellow called Kipling, who before he became a cake magnate was a bit of a poet. He wrote a thing called The Elephant Child, which was a poem, and it says, I have 6 honest friends, they keep me deadly true. I call them who and what and when and where and why and how. And I'll use that as a bit of a framework over the next sort of 20-25 minutes to talk you through my service carer's view. We'll talk about who I am, what this is all about, a little bit of when and where, and then the why is a little ethereal, so we'll leave that out. But the how, I'd like you to think how you can help, not necessarily me, but others like me. I don't give this speech or this talk for me. I give it so people understand, and that, you know, my son is 21 years old, and our journey started at his birth, and some interesting things have happened in that time. And if you, as people who are interested and are on this call, can do something to ease the burden of a carer in the future, that's why I do this. So yeah, we're going to do some context, talk about some policy, because everyone likes policy and rules, especially the Army. And I'm going to give you a bit of reality through some stories. You might be thinking, you know, this is the armed forces, why they're different. A lot of things I talk about will resonate with you through any carer, but hopefully we can unpick that as we go through. So as I said, firstly, it's not about me, but let's talk about me. It's my favourite subject. It's what I know about. If you were to ask me any questions about me, I should be able to get 100% in the exam. But you know, so I said I'm Lieutenant Colonel Gordon. I'm a commanding officer of a regiment. I've been in the Army 30 years. In that time, I've done 22 different jobs. I've deployed on 11 operational tours around the world. And I knew what I was getting into. You know, people often say to me, "Oh, you're in the Army. You know what you get into, the lifestyle and what it's all about." And they also say, you know, you're a senior officer. Things must be a bit easier for you, because, you know, I can phone people up and say I'm a lieutenant colonel, and there's a perception that people jump around and that I don't know, cook me pheasant infused duck eggs for my dinner and cut my grass. I guarantee you, I've never ate a pheasant infused duck egg in my life. And I wasn't born a lieutenant colonel, and I wasn't born a carer of a unique young man. I should give you an emotional health warning. So up front in this slide, I might cry, my voice might go. but this is true, honest, real stuff in my life. So yeah, an emotional health warning. If you can't handle it, well, good luck. Yeah, I wasn't born a carer of a disabled child. I didn't join the army thinking I was going to do 30 years. And as you'll see from that picture, the more astute of you will notice that's the same hat. I just happen to have grown into it now. Because 17-year-old Private Gordon, 30 years ago, didn't realise how expensive hats were. But that's enough about me. As I said, I am the carer, the military carer of a unique young man. So this is my son, Harry. He's 21, born into a service family. The nature of that is a bit different, you know. So he was born in Germany, and I'll tell a little story here to give a little context of how unique Harry is. So Harry has been diagnosed with a carrier type gene translocation of 2P5Q7T. And yeah, it's a code. It's a code because he's the only person in the world with this particular condition. And before he was born, during pregnancy, a blood test was done to check the prevalence of Down syndrome. In Germany, you don't see many disabled people. It's pretty standard practice out there. And my wife came back with the same ratio likelihood of Down syndrome, so trisomy 23 is the code for that, as a 78-year-old woman, and I guarantee she wasn't that age at the time. So off we went to Osnabrück Hospital in northern Germany, where an amniocentesis was done, and all of that was sent off to a Russian geneticist in a German city with British parents. So via 2 translators, a Salvation Army lady, and a couple of doctors, it was notified that, you know, well, science has come on. So at the time they just knew something was different, and Harry had a translocation. And they said, you know, Harry's got this translocation. We've never seen it before. We can't tell you what'll be wrong with him. The termination is booked for 2 o'clock this afternoon. And that was the start of being a carer. You can see that the termination didn't happen at 2 o'clock that afternoon, and 21 years later, we're still meeting doctors who tell us some stuff. They want to write a journal article, but it doesn't really matter. You know, Harry has got lots going on. He looks pretty cool in that picture because he is pretty cool. I don't understand why some disabled children have to have shoes and trousers that don't meet. But I also understand that not everyone is as fortunate as I am. Harry has got lots going on. He's got lots of food intolerances, allergies, pretty entry-level stuff. He's got a seizure disorder. Twice he's had to have CPR because he stopped breathing through seizures. He can't talk or communicate. He's got no mental capacity. Blah, 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 blah. The list is endless. So there's a little bit of context about me, about the army, and about Harry. And I'm going to move on. We'll talk about military context, so a little bit broader. That was quite personal. This is going to be a little bit broader. And please forgive me, I don't get to show people my holiday photos very often. So that's me in Kenya being taught how to use, what's that called? A catapult. And the kid there could hit a bird off a tree. I absolutely couldn't. But, you know, what do you think of when you think of the military? You think of, you know, bearskins on parade on the Queen's birthday and all the stuff you see on TV, or your personal knowledge of it from your own service or family service, or, you know, Uncle Dave who was in the Falklands. But the nature of military life is really that you're dislocated from your wider family. I'm currently sat in Dundee in Scotland because the army needs me to be here. I'm from Dudley in the West Midlands. Those of you that watch Peaky Blinders, forgive me. We move around a lot. Lived in Germany, lived in Colchester, lived in Aldershot, lived in Salisbury, etc., etc. I've lived in 7 different houses while Harry has been part of my life. So yeah, the nature of the job is to move every 2 or 3 years. Sometimes your family can stay in one place, but not always. It's not always practical. For instance, when moving from Salisbury to Dundee, it was suggested, because life was too difficult for everyone who needed to provide support for Harry, that my family stayed in Salisbury. But that's a 648-mile single journey, 12 hours of driving, just to go home. That's just not practical. And the nature of the job is that you're away from your family unit anyway. So, we in the army ultimately are here to defend the nation and its people against an enemy, whether that's traditional war fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, or a virus. So you saw lots of soldiers on TV during the coronavirus stuff, and I deployed for 2 months of that to Bristol to help build the Nightingale there. Or of course, the aggression in Russia is posing in Eastern Europe. Soldiers, sailors and airmen, I acknowledge they exist, often spend a lot of time away from their family, and their family is often away from their family. My family's in the Midlands and is in their 70s. I'm living in Dundee right now with my regiment, and I potentially could end up in Eastern Europe or some other part of the world because the army says so. But in general, we are can-do people. We are of that ilk and nature to just solve a problem. Give us a problem and we would love to solve it. And there's a perception that we're all robust, steely-eyed killers that can run around and carry heavy things. And yes, we do run around and carry heavy things. I'd like to think we're quite robust, but we are ultimately humans. So behind each of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and their families are people with emotions. We might not show them to each other as well as other people, but we absolutely have them. But as I say, ultimately we are about going to war, and that is what we do. And I, in my military career, have done that 11 times. And whilst Harry's been part of our family, I've done it 7 times. So policy. Everyone loves a rule, but defence loves a book. Absolutely loves a book and loves a rule. The 2 top parts there, the Care Act 2014 and the Children and Families Act 2014. Everyone on this line is probably aware of it, if not read it. And no one ever reads a whole policy anyway. They read the bit they need at the time. But overarchingly, those are things that, when it comes to being a carer in the military, you would think those are 2 pivotal pieces of information to understand. And I have read both of them cover to cover, because I'm like that. But in defence, we have policies that sit under them because of the nature of what we do. There is the law of the land, of course there is, but the Defence Act means that we necessarily, as an armed forces, don't have to do everything that's in a particular act. So underneath the Care Act and the Children's Act, the welfare-y type policies that might be helpful for you to be aware of in the future if you have a service family come to you that need guidance and support. The first part of playing any game is to know the rules of the game. If you know the offside rule, you won't be caught offside, hopefully. Or if you are offside, you know when you're offside and you've done it on purpose. So those policies there, I won't read what they are, but I've put them in here just so you're aware they exist. But the key one, if you do have a service person coming to you for help, is the AGI 81 Annex K. So that, and this is a hyperlink, so if anyone gets this presentation, they can click on that. It takes you to the form. That's a 2-page form that anyone who's a service person who's got a dependent with additional needs fills that in and basically sends it to our version of a HR team. And the Navy and the Air Force do have a version of this form, and if someone wants that, I can find it for you. That form tells our HR people that you've got additional needs of your family. The overarching principle of the Army is that the needs of the Army come first and the family are close second. And filling this form in and send it to HR means that not necessarily you won't be posted around. You're talking to a guy who's sat in Dundee, a long way from where he was before. But provision can be made to support the needs of your family. So the Army is good at looking after you. And as an example, I've previously lived in the same house for 8 years and done 2 or 3 different jobs in the same area to enable Harry to get continuity of his education or continuity of his health or social care needs. But without that form being filled in, the Army doesn't know and it won't do anything about it. A lot of people, younger soldiers in particular, don't want to fill that form in because they don't want to highlight that they need extra help. I bounce back to my comment about the nature of a soldier and the robust perception. They don't want to ruin their career by admitting that they've got a weakness. Well, it's not a weakness, it's a superpower. And filling that form in, I will guarantee you, if you just think of that skinny little 17-year-old who joined the army in 1992 and could hardly carry that rifle, through to today, 46, 47, can't remember how old I am, about that, Lieutenant Colonel, I went through the ranks from private to warrant officer, commissioned as a 33-year-old sergeant major, and have now taken over command of a regiment. So filling that form in did me no harm whatsoever. You've got to actually be able to do your job, and you know there's a balance to be had of the sacrifice that can be made. But filling that form in, I cannot tell you how important that is. But I've harped on about that enough, so I'll move on. I talked a little bit when I was on about policy, about how the MOD is exempt from some, and the key bit highlighted there is that the MOD practice is to implement the spirit of UK legislation within overseas commands. I've highlighted that for two reasons. So the spirit of legislation means that they'll try their best, and it says in overseas commands, but actually it's everywhere. And I now know, sitting in Scotland, this is considered overseas. I didn't realise it until I got posted here, and the trouble I've had with Harris Care getting here, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But yeah, the spirit of the legislation is to be used. So we can't use the legislation as evidence as to why the armed forces should do something, but we can use the spirit of it to help them understand. So the next slide is really about my mind. So that's all been about so far. Yeah, we've talked about me, we've talked about Harry, talked about a little bit of military context, and we talked about some policy. And I'm about to show you something that I tried to make quite a snazzy PowerPoint slide. However, I'm not that good with PowerPoint. So in the end, what I did was take a picture. So you're now looking at Brian Gordon, carer in the centre, my mind, things I think about, things I worry about. And when putting this presentation together, the sort of stuff that I wanted to tell you, everything on there. Forgive me for the odd swear word on there because they kind of fell out, and if you find them, you get extra points. But you know, there's a lot going on, and one of the reasons I didn't snazzy it up into a PowerPoint slide, additionally to my lack of PowerPoint skill, is that I think that just tells the story of what's going on in a carer's mind. I've highlighted there in sort of red circles a few things that are sort of big ticket topics. And again, I'll link back to the start where I said, you know, why are we the armed forces a little bit different? Because you're reading that as someone from the NHS, someone from social services, someone from DWP, whatever you might be from, thinking, well, every carer thinks about that. But then lay over the point that I said of moving every 2 or 3 years, the part where you're away from your family and then again dislocated from your home, it just makes it all a little bit more awkward. And I'm going to draw out a few things here that that will help sort of paint a deeper picture. So I'm going to start with the other people, and you'll notice from the sort of back of the slide, as a carer, you deal with all sorts of people: social workers, GPs, teachers, SEN support, consultants, lawyers, government agencies, housing reps, pharmacists, care workers, blah, 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 blah. But you also, and they're all professionals or experts, and they all give advice and guidance. So some of that is good advice and some of that is bad advice. Some of that advice costs you money, and I've had that through social worker advice for legal stuff where they didn't really know what they're on about, spent money on something that didn't need to be done. And then there's the non-professional people. So everywhere you go, you have to tell your story. And I'm here by choice because Jane asked me to. I'm telling you my story. But when I start a new job, when I meet a new person, when Harry has a new appointment, whatever it might be, the minute Harry is mentioned, the story becomes told. And there are people who have genuine interest in this. They absolutely do. And I appreciate that. And like I said at the start, everyone on this call is a good person trying to do good and is here because they care. And I thank you for that. Some people, however, and I'm going to consciously swear, some people are just really good at being a dick. So it's just natural. It's in their DNA. You know, Harry's got a DNA thing, and so have lots of other people. So, for example, in a previous job, I got a new boss. New boss comes in. It's pretty standard to have a little chat with your new boss, not about work, but about life. Chit chat. Mentioned Harry. Talked about Harry. He had a genuine interest in Harry, but I think he was. No, I'm not going to try and do him any favors. He was outdated, and his language and tone were just inappropriate. And as an example, one of the things he said to me was, so because Harry's got limited communication, do you talk to him like he's a dog? And that was the end of that interview, for his safety and for mine. And I left work and went home. People sometimes don't think about what they're saying. People don't understand and resonate with what the impact of what they've said could have with the other person. And on top of that, going back to the sort of telling your story bit, and the NHS have got the Esther stuff, so you're not supposed to tell your healthcare story again. But I bet of the 40 different agencies on this call, your computer systems don't talk to each other. The notes that you're sent from another agency, they're just too big for you to read in the time that you've got. And that's not a criticism of you. That's a criticism of the amount of information anyone is expected to take on board for a new patient or whatever it might be. But you have to constantly tell your story. And also, on top of that, when you're telling your story, it becomes all you are. So all anyone talks to me about is Harry and Karen. But I do like motorbikes, I do like boobs, and I do like beer. Who doesn't? Is a very misogynist thing to say, so I apologise if I've offended anyone, but I do like it. On there as well, you have health, money, job, education. They're all things that, yes, everybody worries about them, but there's a sort of extra layer and connotation to them. So money is a great example. Harry gets benefits. He gets a Motability car, but I have heard people in the care industry say when they think I'm not listening, I wish I had a new car and I wish I could park where I wanted. Well, I'm sure you do, but it comes with a few other perks, such as having to change a pad at 6 o'clock in the morning, having to clean down feces off a wall where someone has had an accident. I'm sure you just want the car and not the other part. So I'll move on a little bit. A few other sort of examples that might sort of paint a picture, and I don't mean to be too negative, and I will come to some positives. But so care and respite. In each of your organisation's policies, I will guarantee that when you look for the armed forces community, it is listed under the transient community aspect of your policy, probably just above or below gypsy travellers and refugees. And so, the Armed Forces Covenant, which we're kind of here to talk about ish, it's not a golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. We as the Armed Forces understand that. But if you just, if you've listened to the stuff I've said in the last 20 minutes or so, we're not in your area because we want to be. Don't take that personally. I'm sure the area you're in is lovely. I see people from Kent and it is the Garden of England. But we have to move very often to places we didn't want to be in, and we're living in a house that is nowhere near our family, and we go to the bottom of a list for stuff. For instance, it took 7 years for my son to get any respite in Aldershot. Currently sat in Dundee. I've been here 6 weeks. He hasn't got a single bit of care in provision from the council. The only stuff that he does is made to happen by his family. And then in the bottom right there, you'd think I'm talking about housing, but I've talked about that a little bit anyway, in sort of adapting a house. But what I'm talking about below there is the emotions and feelings, and the key part probably for any of this is the recognition that you are a carer. I spent a long time thinking I was just Harry's dad, and I am Harry's dad. Don't get me wrong, I'm not rejecting that. But recognizing that you're a carer, it took me a long time to get to that point, because I just did the stuff I did, and it was just perhaps a little bit different because of Harry's needs. Yeah, I'm going to just do 2, maybe 3 little stories and then move on. So going to war, I talked about it earlier. It's what we do. I've done it a few times, but I want to tell a story about the Iraq War 2003. So in March 2003, I was with the Black Watch battle group in the desert south of Iraq, preparing to go to war. Before you go to war, it's not quite like in the movies, but it is a little bit like in the movies where there's a queue of people to use a satellite phone. You get your last little call home before all of the communications get turned off in case anyone's listening. I made that phone call. My wife was in Germany at the time, and I knew that Harry was going to have his tonsils removed. Pretty simple operation in the context of all the stuff that Harry's had done. And in that call, she said, "Oh, he's had some blood tests before his operation, and they think he's got leukemia. We're going back tomorrow for some more tests." And then I hung up the phone, passed it on to the next guy so he could talk to his family, and spent the next 6 weeks fighting an armored war in the desert with a reasonable, decent enemy. Before, just after the Battle of Bridge 4 on the edge of Basra, I used the mobile phone of a Times reporter to call my family and see what was going on. And in that time, there was nothing I could do apart from get on with my job. And luckily, in that phone call, no, he's had his tonsils out. He has got a blood disorder, but it's not leukemia. And basically, Harry's just bluffing. He's like that. He makes it all about him, and all of a sudden, you worry, and then actually, he's stronger than you think. But that's the sort of thing that soldiers have to go through. I'm aware of time, so I won't talk about adapting houses, but I will talk about moving counties and countries. So those of you who've heard me talk before have heard me talk about moving a bed. So Harry has a specialist bed, was given supported by Hampshire Social Services whilst in Aldershot in Hampshire, and moving to Wiltshire, that became an absolute nightmare because Wiltshire wouldn't, Hampshire wouldn't donate the bed to Wiltshire. Bearing in mind what I said about fecal matter earlier, no one else would ever use this bed. Wiltshire wouldn't buy a bed until we were in Wiltshire, and therefore the provision of sleeping, well, there was no provision. And in the end, it got elevated. I wrote to an MP and asked them to help. They got involved, told the 2 councils to bang their heads together and stop wobbling. And the genius plan that came out was that Hampshire would loan Wiltshire the bed until such time as Wiltshire bought the bed. Now, these are £8,000 beds. So we're talking £16,000 of taxpayers' money here, because 2 beds ended up getting bought. So thank you very much, all you taxpayers on the line. But that cannot be a good use of taxpayers' money. And when I tell this to people that equipment couldn't move between borders of, these counties are next to each other, it took less than an hour to drive, and taxpayers' money was wasted, and Harry was left potentially with no provision. On top of that, Hampshire took his wheelchair back, and Wiltshire had to issue a new wheelchair. If you could just talk to each other, that would be great. And if you could talk to each other and do that without bothering the carer, that'd be even better. Because I'll now talk about moving countries. So I'm now in Scotland, and I didn't realise how different Scotland was to England. So on notification of being moved here, I did all the right things, filled in all the paperwork, spoke to social services of Fife, spoke to the health people, etc., etc. And for a long time, Fife County Council spent their time invested in telling me that I couldn't come here and shouldn't come here, and Harry will get no care when he gets here because it's very rural and very expensive to look after Harry. Unfortunately, that's not an option because I'm in the army and I have to go where I'm told. The army came up with a great plan that my family wouldn't move, but I'd move. And that just wasn't a practical plan. And I'll leave the housing part out of this because I'm conscious of time, but there was huge issues with getting housing here that would meet Harry's needs. All of which was based in the policy being fine. And I talked about policy earlier, but the people reading the policy were laying their own layer of things on top of it and saying it was policy, or add in their own thought. Oh, we've got this house that's perfectly good for you and it's already adapted. No, the fact it's got a stair lift in doesn't mean it's good for Harry. Harry doesn't need a stair lift. He can walk up the stairs. What he does need is a series of other things that aren't in that property. But if I go back to the sort of Fife Council and social services, we are now at the position where we have no care for Harry. The social worker has visited once. The legal position is that because Harry has no mental capacity and is over 18, any provision of care in Fife should be paid for by Wiltshire as the losing council, because Harry didn't make a conscious decision to be in Scotland. I can imagine your faces, because I've said this to several people, and the answer is generically a version of with different swear words added. That doesn't sound right. And it doesn't sound right, but legally, apparently it is right. Notwithstanding that, I don't care, because I'm Harry's dad. I'm the carer, and Harry needs some care. Who pays for it? You guys work that out amongst yourself, but provide Harry some care. Within the boundaries of provision of care and moving to Scotland, court orders have been made. It turns out that the guardianship and deputyship are different. So in England, you have deputyship given by the Court of Protection, which I have got for Harry. That's not recognised in Scottish law, and you have to apply for guardianship. Without guardianship, you can't be provided with the finances to enable care. Now, the beautiful part of this is that guardianship, because of the backlog in the courts, takes about 3 years to get, and I'm only posted here for 2.5 years. So if anyone can help with that, I'd absolutely love to hear from you. Again, overlaying that, the point that I made earlier, I don't care. I just want Harry to have some care. I don't care who pays for it. I don't care how it's paid for. It just needs some care. On top of that, Wiltshire Council had the audacity to send a bill asking for financial contribution to the care that isn't being provided, but Fife have asked them to fund through Wiltshire. Again, I don't care. Don't send me a bill. Send me a solution. It's not all bad. You know, I like beer, bikes and boobs. And I'm going to, Harry's 21. He loves nothing more than a motor vehicle and a car and a truck. So that's me and Harry at Brands Hatch. We went to truck racing last November and had an amazing time. We had a great weekend and enjoyed every second of it. We're a family that does normal stuff. We just do it slightly differently. So that's Remembrance Day last year. That's my daughter, Chloe, who often doesn't get a mention in this presentation, but she's 25 this year and is a mental health nurse living in Southampton, getting on with her own life. And she will have her own version of this story as his sister. But, Harry went riding this Saturday, not because anyone helped us do it, but because we made it happen. And myself and Harry are the park run wheelchair assisted champions. Harry always beats me by half a second, and we're not just fair weather runners. You'll see he's got his waterproofs on there, and that was a damp day. It's not all bad. We do cool stuff. We just do it our way. So I'm aware I've run over a little bit. There's a few sort of bullet points there about making sure people get their local carers assessment, and I think I just saw someone was on here from Imago. But different parts of the southeast will have different organisations that can do that for people. It's essential that people get that. The Army Families Federation can help. The Navy and the RAF have got their own versions of that. They've all got additional needs workers. If you Google Candid or go on Facebook, that's a network of people that can help. And I think Claudine's going to talk about them in a minute. And then the Defence Disability Network is an internal military organisation that can support people. And I am the Defence Disability Network Carers Ambassador. So email me if you want some help. Noting I just moaned about how much help I don't get. Jane, I'll draw a line there because I'm very conscious of time. But thank you very much for listening. And are we taking questions now or later?
Thank you, Ed. We can take some questions now. Incredibly powerful presentation.
Sorry, Jane, have I stopped sharing?
You have, yeah.
Cool. Okay.
That's cool. I see, Fiona, you've got your hand up there. You've got a question.
I do, yes. Morning, and I absolutely applaud you, Brian. I'm a carer myself, so I do understand some of the frustrations you've gone through too with the professionals. But I just wanted to let you know that DWP have 50 Armed Forces champions available within the Job Centre and network, and also the Armed Forces Champion Leads. And your contact in Scotland will be Claire Watts. So I will pop her details in the group chat if you've got access to that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Please make
we've written
contact
to
with her.
DWP notifying of change of address, and they haven't even acknowledged it. So
Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Claire. She's an amazing lady. So
okay. Another Brucey bonus of moving to Scotland was they said we'd have to give Harry's Motability car back because the system's different here. But yeah, anyway,
yeah,
I'd love to talk to DWP.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That's really helpful.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. Helen, you've got your hand up. Hi, Helen.
Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Helen Clack. I'm chairman of Surrey County Council, and I'm also chairman of the Surrey Civilian and Military Partnership. Listening to you, Brian, you're an amazing person, and what you deal with is just unbelievable. And I just wanted to ask you, do you ever think of when I know you move around a lot, but do you ever think of contacting your local councillor when you come across the barriers that you get, your county councillor who, you know, provide the social care that you need, get the stuff to come and champion and advocate on your behalf? And if you don't, I hope that you might consider doing that. I know that if I was your local county councillor, I would want to advocate on your behalf when you came up against the walls that you come up against, and hope that that would make a difference.
Helen, thank you. So I didn't talk about it, but on that sort of thought slide, there's a bit on there that talks about complaining, and you get a bit bored of complaining, and you have to run a spreadsheet of complaints to keep track of who you've complained to about what, when, and what the resolution is. And often the resolution of a complaint is someone saying, really sorry, that shouldn't happen. And so I have spoken to councillors, MPs. I've direct dialed General Swift, who's the Chief of Defence People. He's a pretty big deal, and I probably shouldn't have just called him. But you get a bit bored of being that person who's complaining, and some days you don't want to be doing it. You want to do something else. But yeah, I appreciate there are people there that can help, and I guess those in my position or the positions I have been in at some point have just decided, do you know what, I'm going to moan about it, and then I'm going to turn to the right and I'm going to soldier on.
Brian, we are here to help. You know, that's what we get to stand for election for, is to help our residents, whether you're here for a short time or a long time. And we have sort of you know, extra pressure we can put on services to help you, including your MPs as well. I mean, they should be able to help too, but your county councillors who provide the services that you need on a lot of the time, you should put pressure on them. I understand what you mean about complaining, but I wouldn't want that to stop you. I mean, I think you'd find hopefully that we'd be a friendly face and we'd be on your side, and we'd probably do what we could to try and you know, remove some of the barriers. But anyway, thank you very much for your presentation today. It was really fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank
you, Helen. Hi, Nicola, you've got a question?
Yeah, hello. It sounds like, you know, you had a lot of struggles, and it was quite a solitary journey for you and your family. But you're quite well informed. What happens to people that aren't as well as informed as yourself, Brian? And is there anyone in the army that knits this together, a kind of carer support? And I mean, I looked at the Armed Forces Covenant, and there doesn't seem to be anything in it regarding adult social care, which seems a bit ludicrous, really, because, you know, obviously Harry is an adult, but he doesn't come under, you know, you're not coming under the Covenant because it's not there.
Brilliant question, Nicola. Okay, so there's sort of two parts to that, I guess. So the one is about is the what happens when you're not so well informed, and yeah. So when I said I'm a lieutenant colonel and people think it's easy, I probably should have mentioned that it hasn't always been easy, and it isn't easy, and I've learned stuff over the way, like all carers do. So for instance, I know that stair risers should be 220 mils high in accordance with building regulation K 2014, blah blah blah, stairs, ramps, lifts and access. I know that because I've had to learn that to tell an OT to write it in a report. And you're right, there are people who don't know that. There are people who aren't as well informed about the military system, the social services system, the health, the education system. And unfortunately, those people in the army, and I'll use that as the example because it's what I know, that are there to help, the welfare officer. So every unit has a welfare officer. They don't know everything about all of this. They're more of a signpost, and that's where they should dip into people like yourselves on this call as the experts in whatever field it is you're from. So you're right. There are people out there in defence in situations similar to what I have been that can't necessarily reach out. There are networks. So Candid is a network, and you know I'm not a social media kid, so I'm not on Facebook or Instagram. Sorry if you're going to look for me later. But you know, there are ways to get advice and guidance through that sort of social media network. But again, only if you ask, only if you look. So it's a really good, valid point. And the people that are sewing it together are also sewing lots of other things together, and this falls off their priority list. For instance, you talk about the Armed Forces Covenant not having adult social care in there, because the people that wrote it didn't think anyone in the army would have a dependent of that age who needed adult social care. So I've engaged with General Swift and his team, and in fact, what day's today? Tuesday. On Thursday, I've got a meeting with them to discuss how the people strategy can have carers in it as a carers policy. So what? There'll be another policy that no one reads. Is a view, but at least we can try, and have that acknowledged. Did that answer your question, Nicola? I know I probably rambled.
No.
but it's a point really close to my heart. So yeah, thank you. It was a really good question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. And thanks to Fiona for posting the Armed Forces Champion lead there in Scotland in the chat. Any more questions at this point for Ed? One thing I will say, really positive move that's happening. We, from the beginning of April, have become one of the pilot sites for NHS England as the single point of contact for armed forces, carers and families. So the year before last, there was a big consultation with NHS England, and what came out of that was carers and families saying that actually what we need is a single point of contact in our area for any issues we've got, health, social care, housing, whatever it is. So us in Kent and Sussex, Kent and Medway, we're one of 3 pilot sites. Over the next 18 months, we will be that single point of contact. We are making sure we're engaging with all our local units, promoting what we're doing, and hopefully this will go some way to you know, addressing some of the problems we're hearing about today. And you know, in the future, who knows, maybe that will become something that is right across the country, that single point of contact, because as we've heard from Brian, you know, you lose track of who you've needed to engage with and complain to and so on. So I hope, fingers crossed, this is going to be something that will help our serving families and carers. Thank you, Ed. There will be a chance at the end for any other questions people might think of to ask Ed. But we're now going to move on and hear from Claudine, her experiences of living with a chronic condition while serving in the military. So welcome, Claudine, and over to you. I'll let you share your screen.
Thank you, Jane. I'll just share my screen now. Is my screen? Oh, okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Jane just introduced me, I am Staff Sergeant Claudine Martin. I'm currently employed as the Chief Clerk at 11 Security Forces Assistant Brigade in Aldershot. Thank you so much for the opportunity again once more to share my experiences. I'm a huge advocate for the Candid Network, which is the Chronic Conditions and Disability in the Defense Network, and whatever I can do to help and support people who are serving with chronic conditions, I'm always willing to help because I've experienced that myself. So just moving on to my next slide. Sorry, can you see the slide?
No, it's disappeared, Claudine, the presentation.
Okay, do you mind then just loading from your end then, and then I'll give you the go ahead to click for next slide.
No problem. If I can ask Mandy, my colleague, is that all right, Mandy?
Thank you.
Screen share. There we go. Thank you, Mandy.
I can't see it from my end just yet.
Should come up any moment, Claudine.
Okay.
I can see it on here. Just let us know when you can see it.
Okay, thank you.
How's that?
I can't see it yet.
Okay. Can everyone else see that? Or is it nobody can see it apart from me?
I can see it.
Can see it.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not sure why. Not sure why I can't see it.
Mandy, any ideas?
And Claudine, it might be because your camera's on and there's too much bandwidth coming from the same computer.
Oh, okay. Should I try to share it again?
Yeah, can do.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll attempt it. Right, is that visible?
Perfect.
Right, let me see if I can. Okay, yes, I can now see. So, so the outline of my PowerPoint today shouldn't be a long presentation. I'll try and get as much as possible that I think is relevant. So, for my outline of my presentation, I'll give you a background of who I am, my experiences serving in the military. I'll be also looking at the challenges and the setbacks that I face due to my current chronic conditions. And then lastly, I'll also look at the bright side of things, that sometimes bad things happen, but at the same time, you can take a positive out of it. So a bit about me then. You can tell from, I always say that when I'm introducing myself, you can tell from my accent that I'm from the Caribbean. I originated from Jamaica. I came to the UK in 2002 as a 17-year-old. I came to visit my aunt. I did like London at the time that I was living, so I decided I'm going to pursue opportunities of staying in London. I can see that the slide has gone off again, so I'll just I figure out what I was doing wrong, so I'll reshare it. Right. So yes, back to what I was saying. So I originate from Jamaica. I was brought up there, went to school there, and I came to the UK at the age of 17 in London. At the age of 21, I had my first child, Chazim. And then while serving in 2011, I had my second child, who's Chelsea, a girl. I joined the army when my son was a year old in 2006. Was a bit hard. I went to the careers office when he was about 7 months old, and they said, "Are you sure you want to join the army with such a young baby?" I said, "It's something that I want to do." At the time, I was living in London, not doing much. Met a friend, and she was telling me about her experiences of serving in the military, and I said, definitely, I would like to do it. So I joined the army then. I've realized the slide has gone off again. Is it something that you probably may attempt sharing for me again? I'm not quite sure why it just keeps going off, because I can't see it now.
Yeah, Mandy, can you just give it another go? Can you see that, Claudine?
No, I can't see it.
Have you got your presentation up in front? So maybe if you say, ask Mandy to move the slide on, you'll know what slide she's on.
So yeah, okay.
So she's
I'll
on your
do that then.
your intro slide, serving with a
Okay.
chronic illness.
Right, I'll load that up.
So now she's on slide 2 outline.
Okay, so I've looked at that. So my next one is the introduction. So yeah, I was talking about my military experience. I joined when my son was just a year old. I went to the careers office. They said, "Are you sure you want to join with such a young baby?" And I said, yes. I met up with a friend of mine that I went to high school with in Jamaica. She was telling me about what she was doing, and I said, "Oh, I would love to try that." So I went and joined the army in 2006. I will go more into my experiences of serving in the next slide. So a bit about me as well. I am currently pursuing a degree with the University of Lincoln. I'm in my last month of study. I'm doing a degree in human resources management, and I can't wait. I'm currently doing my dissertation and my research project, and I'm not going to lie to you, it's very, very stressful, but I've only got one more month, so I'm pushing through as much as possible. So in my spare time, I love traveling. I love to travel. I love to go to different countries, taste different food, experience different experiences. So know that the COVID restrictions are not as much as what it is. I'm happy to go places. So I've only just returned from my home country of Jamaica a week ago. I went to see my dad and other family members that I've got there. I also, just like what Ed said, Colonel Ed said, he does parkrun. I absolutely love parkrun. One of my favorite hobbies. I'll do it every Saturday morning, whether it's raining, it's snowing, I'm out there doing it. I love it. I'm also a passionate mentor, involved in a few mentoring programs. The first one is I'm not sure if you've heard of the Diana Award. I'm also a mentor for the Princess Diana Award, which is a mentoring program in the honor of Princess Diana. And it's a program to help young people to learn more about themselves. So I've been allocated to the Deptford Green School in New Cross, and I go in on a Tuesdays and I do sessions with year 9 and year 10 students, and I absolutely love it. I also mentor for a program called Fast Forward 15, which is a program for women who wants to get into the events, hospitality and related industries. I worked as a PA previously at the Ministry of Defence. Whilst doing so, I did a lot of networking with EAs, PAs and event planners. So that's just a little bit about me in a nutshell itself. Next slide, please. So looking at my military experience, so going back basic training, I did my basic training in Pirbright in 2006. It was a 14 weeks training. I'm not going to lie to you, it was very hard. Again, having a 1-year-old baby, your body is still a bit delicate, a bit fragile. But I did it, and to be honest, I was one of the girls who were in the top 5 of the fittest because I prepared myself so much because I want to ensure that I did it. After I finished basic training, I went on to my phase 2 training in Winchester in 2007. It was only 8 weeks training. So as soon as I finished that, I then got posted on to the Irish Guards in Aldershot in 2007. I deployed with them to Iraq straight away within 2 weeks of turning up the camp. They said, oh, you're going to Iraq. I did a few days of OPTAG training, and then I was out to Iraq for 6 months. At first, it was daunting. It was an experience. I was quite fearful. It was still the peak of the war. I wasn't sure what to expect, not having much military experience, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the experience, and I've met a lot of friends from Iraq who are now still my friends. In 2009, as the Guards normally do, they sometimes rotate just to share the ceremonial duties. So the Irish Guards moved to Windsor. And because at the time, my son was seeing the pediatrics to find out what was happening because he had some special needs, I decided to stay in Aldershot with the Coldstream. So I did a year with the Coldstream instead of moving to Windsor in Aldershot. So in January 2010, I then got another posting to go up to the military working dogs there in North Luffinham in Leicestershire. I did 2 years with them during that posting as well. That's when I got pregnant with my daughter. I had her in 2011. So I went on 7 months maternity while I was there. Following that, I went on to 2-2 Engineer Regiment in Permdown. Really good posting. I was there from 2012 to 2015, promoted to sergeant whilst I was there. And then on my first assignment as a sergeant, I went to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, another good place to be. And then my best of all posting, though, I went to MOD in 2018, where I worked as a PA initially to ACGS, and then it got retitled to DENC, which is Director Engagement and Communications. I work as a PA to Major General Neil Sexton. Brilliant posting, I loved it. And then currently now, I am with 11 SFA Brigade in Aldershot for a 2-year post. My military deployments include Iraq, which I've mentioned before. I also deployed to Kenya on training exercise last year, October. I've also done duties in Cyprus, adventure training in Germany, etc. Next slide, please. Right. So going on now to the challenges and setbacks that I've experienced in the military. My career started out as a young private. It was really well, going on really well. Even though I had a child while serving, that never stopped me from doing what I was doing. I was still promoting, I was still deploying, enjoying life, doing what I was doing. So when I came off the sergeant board, when I promoted to sergeant in 2015, went into my first job as a sergeant at the Royal Military Academy in 2016. I remember turning up to work feeling really, really tired. Going into work every morning, I started getting tired. Couldn't be asked getting out of bed. Started losing weight. I lost my appetite. I would get like swelling now and then and a bit of joint pain. I remember sitting in a meeting one day and my REO at the time said to me, right, you always seem disinterested when you're in meetings. You can't be asked contributing. This is not the standard we're expecting of a sergeant. But I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know what it was. So after speaking to a friend, this went on for a few months. I had enough and I said, you know what, I need to go and see the doctor because this is not me. I went to see the doctor and I was telling her what my symptoms were that I've just mentioned. And she said it could be a possibility of a few things, but for them to know, they need to run some blood tests. Within 2 days, I got a phone call from one of the doctors and she said, sorry, I don't think it's quite good news. From your blood test, we suspect that you've got lymphoma. And I remember saying to her, what is lymphoma? And she explained to me it's a form of blood cancer. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? So I went through the process when I was referred on to a rheumatologist. Sorry, not a rheumatologist, a hematologist. And after doing more blood tests and a PET scan, I remember I got a phone call to say that I need to come into the hospital. That was Frimley Park Hospital. She started to show me the results from the PET scan, and she said, I'm really sorry, I do think you have lymphoma, because we can see that it's spread onto your diaphragm. I remember the shock at the time that I felt. Went home, I cried, I called my parents. And following up, they said, okay, we need to do a biopsy though, just to make sure that that's what it was. So I went, I had a biopsy, and I think probably within 10 days, I got a phone call from one of the nurses. She said, we're normally not supposed to give results over the phone, but the hematologist wants me to know, to let you know that actually the biopsy showed that you don't have lymphoma. And I remember the sigh of relief. And they said, okay, what they're going to do is they think it's something autoimmune, so they're going to refer me on to a rheumatologist. This was back in ending of April, early May 2016. I went to see the rheumatologist. I told her what my symptoms were, and she said, I think I know exactly what you've got. And I said, what is that? She said, I think you've got lupus. Have you heard of it? And I said, yeah, I've heard of lupus, because I know some celebrities, like I think it was Tony Braxton, and there were other few, I think Kelly from Eternal Flame. I said, I know those celebrities have lupus and they always publicly talk about it. She said, that's what I think you've got, but I need to do some more tests. So she ran some more tests, and within a month came back. She said, you've been diagnosed with lupus. So I was diagnosed with lupus in 2016. So what that is then, what is lupus? Many times I've gone to places speaking to people, and a lot of people have never heard of lupus before. So lupus is a autoimmune illness, and this is where your immune system becomes overactive. And what it does is, rather than fight things that are not meant to be in the body, like infections, bacteria, and so on, it starts attacking your body. So it starts attacking healthy tissues, for some people, their organs. It's a very, very complex illness. And for some people, diagnosis can take up to 7 years or even longer, because the thing about this illness that it mimics other illnesses, where if you remember, I said at first they thought it was lymphoma because it can mimic other illnesses. Some of the symptoms that I get occasionally from my lupus is I really do suffer with bad hair loss, a bit of alopecia. Sometimes I get really tired. Depend on what's happening. Sometimes I lose weight, but the worst one for me is the skin rashes. I suffer with bad skin rashes when I get a flare, especially if I go out in the sun. And from that is with lupus, another complexity of lupus is as well that you can develop secondary illnesses, which I have. So I've developed Raynaud's, which is one of my biggest bugbears. Raynaud's is where the blood flow in your fingers, and for some people the toes, is a bit restricted. So you can get a bit of swelling, lose a bit of the color into your fingers. You can have like a sort of bluish color fingers, dark blue. And it, for me, sometimes it can be one of the hardest symptoms that I've experienced, because when I get a really bad Raynaud's flare, it limits me to what I can do. So the simple things like even holding my toothbrush to brush my teeth, holding a knife and fork, tie my laces, do zips, buttons with my hair, those simple little things I find that difficult as well. I've also, so back in May last year, I had my COVID vaccine, and I suffered a really, really, really bad flare from having the COVID vaccine. So I had really, really bad skin rashes, the worst I've seen. I remember going to the rheumatologist, and she said, I've never seen you this bad. Developed really bad alopecia. And then the rheumatologist put me on some steroid medication to calm it down. So I've always only been on hydroxychloroquine, which is one of the most common medications they use to treat lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So I've remained on one medication for years until last year when I had my COVID vaccine. They put me on the steroid. The steroid did do the job. It did suppress the lupus a bit. I started to recover. And then being at the brigade, they normally do yearly, they go out to Kenya to do an exercise that they called Askari Storm. So I was put down to go and manage the iHub, which is the information hub for the exercise. So I deployed to Kenya. So I finished my treatment of steroids and deployed to Kenya. I can remember probably day 2 or 3, I started getting a lot of swelling, really bad rashes. I've noticed I've lost pigmentation on my fingers, face, and I suffered the worst flare since my diagnosis in 2016 whilst I was in Kenya. The worst flare ever. I remember I was struggling to eat when I was in the cookhouse, just struggling to get myself to the shower because my feet were swollen. There was a lot of things I had to get in some of the girls that were in the room with me to help me even lift my bags and doing all of that. To be honest, the sad part of it is, and I don't hide it because it's just true. The sad part of it is, whilst I was going out, one of the things in the army is when you've got when you're limited to deploy, because I've got the condition, it means that I've got a limitation of deploying. So I could deploy, but there are limitations. So it means that your chain of command has to do a risk assessment before sending you out. So I did do a risk assessment with my boss. We look at the possibilities of what could happen because I've got lupus going out there. So we did know that the certain factors like the heat could cause me a flare. I could be exposed to infections and all of that. But the doctor signed it off to say, yep, she's fine, good to go. We'll get her out. While I was there suffering, it was really bad that my chain of command, don't know if they didn't notice or that they didn't care, or that what they were doing out there, the mission that they were sent on, was probably important that they didn't notice that I was suffering, I was limping. While I was going through that, no one asked me how I was doing. You could physically see my face red, burnt. I've started to lose pigmentation. I'm limping, my hands are swollen. And the local workers on the camp in Kenya would stop me and ask me, like, sister, what's wrong with you? Your face looks burnt, you're limping. But my chain of command, the people that I deployed with, no one asked me how I was doing. I remember mentally I was in a bad place. Physically, I was in a bad place because I was struggling to do the little things like even going into the shower and brushing my teeth, eating, walking around. I used to go to finish at the end of the day. I go under my sleeping bag and I will cry myself to sleep because I'm struggling. After week 3, we left the camp in Kenya and we went out to the exercise area. So this is where we're now doing the exercise phase of it, where we're in the bushes, sleeping on camp beds and underneath a tent. After day 3, after day 3 of being out on the exercise, I just couldn't hack it anymore. I went to the medical tent and I said to the medic, right, this is what's happening. I've got lupus. She looked at me and she was like, she said, I'm almost certain the doctor is going to send you back, because she said you can't stay here anymore and there's not much that they can do because you will need to see a specialist. She called the doctor. It was late in the night when I went to see them. She called the doctor. The doctor said, okay, we'll book her to see her first thing in the morning. The medical center is an hour away from the exercise area. So they've arranged that my chain of command send a driver to come and get me. They told me, get ready for 8 o'clock. Your appointment is at 9:40. So we need to leave by 8 to ensure that you're in time for your appointment. Got ready at 8. I was waiting. No one turned up. 8:30, no one turned up. 9 o'clock, no one turned up. So I went to find the person who was in charge and I said, I've got an appointment at 9:45. It takes an hour. It's now after 9 and no one turned up. He said, oh, I'm not sure where he is. Anyways, 9:45 past, 10, 11, going up to 12. Someone turned up and I said, well, my appointment is at 9:45. They said, well, we weren't told that your appointment at 9:45. We were just told that you need to come back to camp. Plus, we've got an officer that needs to do a recce of the area. So we have to take her around for the recce. And then when we're finished, we can take you back to camp. So I went into the vehicle, drove around with them for about an hour for this officer to recce the exercise area. By the time I got to the medical center, they said, it's too late. We've got no more appointments. We can't fit you in. Why didn't you turn up? I explained that the transport that's meant to get me didn't turn up in time because they said they weren't aware that I had an appointment. So they booked me on for the next day. Next day, I went to the doctor. Doctor said, right, you have to go back. I can't believe you've been sat there for so long suffering, and it only took you now just to come forward. I said to the doctor that normally when I normally flare for maybe a week or a few days, and then eventually I was getting better. So I was just watching it to see if things would get better, but I realized it wasn't getting better. So I knew I then had to do something about it. I knew I had to do something about it. I had to see the doctor. So the doctor did his report. He sent an email to my chain of command and said, right, we have to send her back because with her condition, she's flaring. There's not much I can do because she needs to see a rheumatologist because it's a specialist condition. So I got Aeromed back within a week. I was sent back to the UK, so I cut the tour short. I was meant to do 6 weeks. I did 3 weeks instead. I came back and mentally I was still struggling. I felt a bit let down that they deployed me to an area where we knew there was, I knew there was, and to be honest, I wanted to go because I wanted the experience of just going on the exercise in Kenya because I've heard a lot of good stories about the training area and what they do. But they also knew that I've got this condition. So for me to get out there while I was suffering, I went and spoke to my immediate line manager. I told him about what I've experienced. And I said to him, I wouldn't want someone else to go through what I went through. And I want to see what can be done. After a while, I heard nothing from them. They told me, oh, go and speak to the Padre to see what can be done. I went and spoke to the Padre. I told him what happened. He said, oh, we'll speak to your chain of command. He will speak to my chain of command. I heard nothing. I wasn't satisfied with that. So I sent an email to he was the chair at the time, but he's no longer the chair of the Candid Network. In my email, I detailed everything that happened, and he wasn't happy with what I told him. He was like, that is not on. So he's asked me if I was okay staffing it up to the medical chain there in Army HQ for them to have a look at it, because what he was saying is that you're part of the chronic conditions network. You know what's available. And if you're treated like that, what about other people who aren't aware of certain things and probably going through that or going through worse? At the moment, they're looking into that. So that's one of the things that I can say based on what I've experienced so far. It's just one of the worst things I've experienced since my diagnosis. To be honest, prior to that, so when I served at Sanders, I served at MOD, the chain of command was very understanding. I always let them know what my condition is and how it affects me. So if I need support, then they can support me. I think one of the other things as well, when I was in MOD London, I was selected for a promotion to staff sergeant, so I needed to move on. I gave them all my documentation to say, I'm currently under the care of Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital, and I would rather not move, because what happened to me previously was when I moved from Camberley, I was under the care of Frimley Park. Then I moved to London and I decided to transfer over to Guy's and St. Thomas's. When I went to the doctors and the other specialists that I was seeing, they were like, we can't really see. They wanted to start me over on a new treatment. And I'm like, no, but I've already had that. And they said, oh, well, we can't see what the other hospital is doing because it's different hospital. They use different system. So then I had to start all over again. So I didn't want to repeat that process. So I put in through my chain that showed them my diagnosis letter. I got a letter of support from the doctor to say she needs to remain in London because we need to keep her in Guy's and St. Thomas's so she can have her care. And I don't know how they've done it on the assignment. They said, oh, well, when we did the assignment, we didn't look at you, and then we've got no more postings in London. We tried to get someone to swap, so they can't swap, so we have to send you to Aldershot instead. And I was like, okay, Aldershot is commutable, it's 35 miles, but I would have preferred that if one of those jobs that were available in London, I could have done that. It would have been a lot easier than have to commute. So they couldn't facilitate a job for me in London, so that's how I came to the brigade. But the good thing is, in terms of housing, I've retained my housing. I live in Wimbledon and I've retained my housing in Wimbledon. So I commute to Aldershot sometimes. I do a bit of hybrid working since COVID. So that has worked for me. So I've retained my housing in London. I still come under the care of Guy's and St. Thomas's. So there are perks to it where it all depends on where you are, who your chain of command is, how knowledgeable they are. Some of them will support you, but some of them, if they don't have the knowledge, you don't get that support, or I don't know, it could be that some of them probably don't care. It's not a priority for them. The focus is the mission and whatever tasks they've got to do, which I felt that was the case in Kenya, where I felt the mission and the task, what they've got to do, was more important than taking into consideration that, right, you have the welfare of your soldiers, because without your soldiers, you can't do anything. The mission and the task won't be able to done without the people. So you need to ensure that they're okay to get that task done. I don't know about Ed, but one of the things I've noticed, which I'm not the only one who I've heard said this, and this is one of the things about being in the army, you move around every 2 to 3 years. So if you move from one location and you have to move your care or your treatment, it can sort of disrupt the whole process and can sort of set you back for a bit. Because just like when I try to ask, when I said to one of the healthcare professions, I said, how comes you can't see what Frimley Park was doing when it's just one NHS? I've got one NHS number. And they said because different hospitals use different system. And one of the doctor did say he doesn't think that the NHS is so much designed for military because we move around so often. So that can be a challenge for some people who are suffering with chronic conditions. It depends on the unit that you go to, because if you go to a unit where the job means that you have to constantly deploy or you constantly have to be there, but then you've got a chronic condition yourself, that can be a bit difficult for you. But going into the military academy standards, it was a non-deployable post. I didn't have to deploy, so that worked well for me. Going to MOD was also a non-deployable post, and then coming to 11 SFA Brigade isn't really a non-deployable post. I deployed, but then I realized it sort of really backfired on me. But the focus is I've been speaking a lot with the Chronic Conditions and Disability Defence Network. I'm part of the exec committee. That network supports families, service person and carers of people who are suffering with chronic conditions and disability, and they've been doing a lot of work to try and build that. So I've been working with them. I've shared my experience. Other people have shared their experience as well, and the focus is to try and get that support for service person and their families who really need it. So that's that the whole Kenya thing was just one of my worst points since I've been diagnosed in 2016 of what happened. And like I said before, it could be lack of knowledge. It could be that their priority wasn't that at the time. But my focus is, whilst I'm part of Candid, is to ensure that nobody else goes through that, and that there's support in place to support soldiers who are serving with chronic conditions, especially if you've taken the risk to send them overseas or send them in areas that you know that can cause issues or risk to them as a person with their illness. So that's where I'm at with that. The next slide, please. I think this is the final slide. So looking at the bright side, then, when I say look at the bright side, yes, it was hard when I was diagnosed in 2016. I've experienced a few flare-ups, and I said some were worse than some were mild. And it's hard having 2 children, single mom to 2 children, working full-time and doing a degree as well. People ask me all the time, how do you manage all of that? How do you juggle working full-time with a chronic condition as lupus, doing a degree, and then plus all the other things that I do on the side? I volunteer as well. And I said, I just try and balance it as much as possible. I know my body. I know when my body's telling me something. I know when I can't do something. And I know if I take it on and it's too much, I'll take a break from it. But looking at the bright side, yes, it's unfortunate that for a lot of people being diagnosed with an illness, it will change your life. It will change your life forever. Lupus doesn't have any cure. It's an illness that I have to live with for the rest of my life, which means that I have to be on medication for the rest of my life. So I'm now on 4 different medications. I've been put on methotrexate, which is a chemotherapy drug used to treat some form of cancers, mainly used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and lupus. But what does that mean for me then? So since I came back from Kenya, I've now left with life-changing scars because I flared so badly while I was there. I then went on to have discoid lupus, which is another form of lupus, but this is when your the lupus attacks your skin. So I came back with really, really horrible scarring, vitiligo. I lost pigmentation in my face. And yes, it did affect my confidence, especially the fact that it was in my face. I felt like people were looking at me all the time. People would ask me what happened to me. So I find that I did lose my confidence a bit, and I wasn't going out with friends like I would used to. I did seek mental health support from the doctor after a recommendation from a friend, because he said, Claudine, you need help. I can tell it's affecting you. you need to go and see a doctor. So I've been to see a doctor. I'm now seeing a dermatologist who is managing the care of trying to sort of get my skin to some normality. He did say to me that my scars are permanent, but they will sort of fade a bit, but they will just still be permanent. So the methotrexate medication that I mentioned earlier on means that I have to be non-deployable. So I no longer can deploy in the military. Also with that means that you're unable to be assigned overseas to certain locations. And I was told back in December when I had my medical review with the doctor that I will be going to a medical board with the high possibility of getting medical discharge due to my constant flares. So I'm now looking at the possibility of getting medical discharge from the army, perhaps later on in the year. I go to a medical board sometime in the summer, so I'm waiting to find out what's the decision from that. But I think it's yes, with what they've said, I'll definitely be going. So I'm looking forward to a new challenge. I've started my resettlement. I'm looking at opportunities that are out there, and yeah, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be just. It's one of those things. I sort of knew that being diagnosed with an illness that my career could be short term, medium term, that I wouldn't have a long term career. So yeah, that's given me. But going back to looking at the bright side, I've become more resilient and stronger. My friends always say to me that you are very strong. And I always say, well, you have to be strong when you're in a situation when you've got no choice. I've got no choice. I have to be strong. I've got 2 children that I have to look after. So I've got no choice. So it has made me more resilient. I look at things more positively, and I always tell myself that everything happens for a reason, and no matter what you're going through, things will always get better. So when I'm at a low point with my lupus, especially last year when I suffered my worst flare, I would write poems just to sort of keep me going and keep me motivating myself. I would write poems about my experience, and I would share it with other lupus sufferers. I'll share it with the Lupus UK website and other Lupus UK charities to sort of give other sufferers like myself support. I have great support from family and friends. I've become a lot closer to some family members and a lot closer to friends because I've shared my experience with them so that they can understand how my illness affects me. I'm a huge advocate for the Candid Network and also an advocate for the Lupus UK, which Lupus UK is the UK's national charity for people who suffers with lupus. So annually, I normally take part in the London 10K and to raise funds for Lupus UK for future research and also to raise the awareness of the illness. So I'd either get family or friends or work colleagues to come out with me. Normally get about 5-6 friends to run the race with me. They also raise money and I also raise money. So I normally do that yearly for Lupus UK. Since then as well, I've always had an ambition to be a public speaker, but since my diagnosis, I've now been doing more public speaking to raise the awareness of lupus and also to inspire change. So I do public speaking for any events that's got to do with charity or in the schools. I also do public events, speak publicly to Girls Guide and young people, as well as the PA profession. I previously worked as a PA, as I mentioned before, so I also normally do their annual conference where I speak to PAs about how to enhance their careers and things that they can do. And then on the bright side of that as well, when you put out a lot and you do things to inspire change and help people recognize your hard work. And I've won numerous awards, a lot of awards for what I do, taking the time out. Recently, I won Outstanding Achievement at the Business Support Awards. I was named a top 5 Defence Rising Star last year for We Are the City Rising Star Awards, P of the Year previously. So looking at the bright side of things, yes, it's hard serving with a chronic condition whilst in the military. The Candid Network is good network to support people. The problem is just sometimes at the chain of command, sometimes may not have the knowledge to do it. And that's what the Candid Network is there, putting all these strategies to ensure that people with conditions or families or carers are being supported. I'll find out later on in the year about my medical status that I'll get discharged. To be honest, I'm looking forward to going now, because I do agree with the medical professions that where I'm at now, in terms of my career, that maybe leaving and doing something else where I can manage my illness probably would be the best shout for me. So that's where I'm at now. But wherever, if I plan to still if I'm allowed to probably be a veteran advocate when I leave to the Candid network, where I still can offer support to people that are serving, especially people who are looking at leaving, because I know what it's like when you don't have the support. But just to summarize what I've said about serving with a chronic condition, it all depends on where you are. Some chain of command are supportive, some of them are knowledgeable, or if they don't have the knowledge, they will go and find out and support you. But you do have that sometimes you'll go to some places where they're not very supportive. Or there was one point that Ed made about how sometimes people don't think what they say. Sometimes they say things without not thinking. I've had that over the years, being diagnosed. I think recently I went to an event and I was speaking to some ladies, and one of the ladies asked me, she said, "Oh, what happened to your skin? Why are you scarred like that?" And I was explaining to her what happened. I went to Kenya, and her first thing was, "But how do you find a man with your skin looking like that?" I'm like, "Oh, what am I supposed to say?" And someone just jumped in and said, "You can't say stuff like that." So the person who interrupted said, "I've just recovered from cancer. I've just been through chemotherapy. You don't say that to people." So that's the other thing as well, where sometimes some people, maybe not maliciously, will do it, but they just sometimes don't think about the things that they've said. But I try to stay positive regardless of what's happening. That's the most important thing for me. I try to stay positive for my kids, my family, and my friends. And I will continue to be an advocate for Lupus UK, continue to advocate for service personnel who are serving with the chronic conditions, because I know it's hard. I've been through it and I've experienced it. And I will also do my best to sort of educate the line managers or the chain of command who needs to know what it's like living with the service condition and with the chronic condition and serving, as well as supporting their personnel while they're in barracks or if they're overseas with that. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening to me blob it out about my experiences of serving. I know the IT was a little bit of issue, but we still managed to get there. So thank you so much again for giving me the opportunity to listen to what I've said. I hope you can take something back from this, if there's other things that you need to be aware of or how other support can be made. So thank you very much.
Wow, Claudine, thank you. Inspirational is the word, definitely. And also, I would say the military's loss is Civvy Street's gain. Absolutely, with whatever you're going to do next. I can see a couple of hands up to see here. Helen, you've got your hands up. Helen Clack. Okay, I'm gonna come back to Helen. Helen, are you there?
Yes, sorry. Slowly, that was a historical hand up. I should have taken it down, but as I'm here, can I just thank Claudine very much for her wonderful presentation. I really hadn't any idea just how complicated this was for you, and it makes me understand it a lot better too, what you have to go through. So well done, and thank you very much for your contribution this morning. And I'll take my hand down now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. Lawal, hello, you've got your hands up.
Hi, Claudine. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel, as well. Thank you so much. I'd like to I'll start with questions, just more of for everyone to understand. So I'm part of London and Essex network. We support veterans from the Departments of Works and Pension. So if you're out the army, I mean, I'm ex-military myself. So, when I came out, didn't get much of a support. That has driven my, my ambition to provide support for veterans. So especially if you've got, chronic conditions and whatever it is, when you leave the army, you do need that support. You need, we've got access to a lot of other third parties, that we can provide help, support for yourself and your family. So not just for veterans. So, you know, when I think someone mentioned, you know, talking to Lieutenant Colonel about being experienced. So we do have a lot of you know, experience in directing, supporting, and helping veterans and their family to settle back down into the civil street when they eventually leave. So I think it's quite important to know. I have put in our email address. So if you know, from anywhere, if you have anyone, any veterans that just, or their family member that needs support, if you send us an email, we cover everything from PEEP to work capability assessment to getting the financial support you need. We cover housing, you know, education. So if it's resettlement, if you want to go into a different aspect of life, you know, following any, you know, medical experience or medical life-changing experience you may have, we are there to support in every aspect that you may think of. And if we cannot support, we've got, you know, like I said, we can direct you to, you know, third parties, other stakeholders that we work with that can sort of provide that support. So we are part of the Armed Forces Covenant, and we hold true to that. You know, we have a team leader. His name is John. And he makes sure that these things get done. And there's a team of 8 of us in London and Essex, and then there's a wider network in the whole of the UK. I believe a couple of my colleagues are here as well on this call. But thank you very much for your life experience. Thank you for sharing them. You know, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much also for sharing. If you could please put your details in the chat box so I can have that, because based on what you've said, I think that would be really useful, because I recently claimed for PIP and they turned me down to say like I'm not ill enough. So yeah.
We can definitely look into that. I mean, I work with 34 veterans myself. So I cover Essex. There's 2 of us, but I've got colleagues in East, West, North, and South London that we take a look, and we've got internal access to how this assessment that's done. We can speak to the right people. Currently fighting for one of our veterans. You know, he's got CFS, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And you know, so yeah, how these things are done, we can speak to people, we can offer support, guidance, and help, just to make sure that when you eventually leave the army, you're not at a disadvantage at all.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're on the civil street, we aim to, you know, try and get you what you deserve in terms of your benefits and hopefully housing as well. We can look into that, housing supports and stuff like that. So yeah, I have put our email inbox in there in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, London. I'm gonna put it again. I think it's gone up the chat.
Yeah, good idea, Lowell.
Yeah,
You can put it in again.
If you email us, one of my colleagues, myself, or these other 7, we can pick it up and we will send you an email back and we can start. I don't know if you know about NHS Up Courage.
No, I've never heard of it. No.
Or NHS Up Courage is literally the military, the NHS aspect of veterans. So they literally can also provide you support. And I think, you know, for what you've mentioned, you might also be, you know, you can work with them as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, my thing just disconnected, but I'm trying to connect back. Just give me 1 minute, please. So yeah, I mean, NHS Up Courage is also where we can get support for you. You could do the referral yourself. So we have links in all this organization that can yeah. Oh yeah, thank you very much. Someone's posted it on there. So yeah, that's yeah, and yeah, we can do more. So please get in touch. And any other organizations that want to get in touch, please do send us an email, and we'll be happy to provide help and support that we can.
Thank you.
Brilliant, Lowell. Thank you so much. And Mandy's posted there the Up Courage, which we know is the Veterans Mental Health and Wellbeing Service. Brendan, hi, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi Jane. Thanks, Claudine. Thanks to Lieutenant Colonel as well. Just two observations, and Claudine, it's nice to see you in my neck of the woods, opposed to North Luffenham, which is about 20 miles away from where I live in Leicestershire. So I'm glad you did a tour in one of the best counties in the country. So that's my advice. And seriously, two observations is I know the Lieutenant Colonel spoke about the legal aspects of things, but from his perspective, what about your son's human rights, and has that been contested, especially with the squabbling and arguments that seem to be happening between the two councils in the south of England? And again, with you, Claudine, is there not a case for at some level of medical negligence with regards to the flare-up of lupus that you suffered in Kenya? I'm just thinking, you know, down the legal pathway, and I genuinely think, because I deal a lot with veterans who have left service, and the stories I could tell are many and as complicated and as moving as the two this morning. And it just seems that we're constantly battling the same problem, is that we do service for our country, and we are doing service for our country, and when it comes a time for us to leave, we're sort of left hanging there in the wind. And that's sort of that transition that you may be going through, Claudine, with not knowing what courage is about, which is available to serving personnel. So why is that not available? Why are you unaware of that? And something that surely there's a bigger piece that needs to be doing across the whole of the Armed Forces network is the consistency of care for serving personnel and the transition as they make out into Civvy Street. That's just an observation I'd like to make.
Thank you, Brendan. Any thoughts, Claudine, Ed?
Okay, I'll go first. So the point that you've made, a few people mentioned that to me as well, and I've thought the same thing about some sort of medical negligence while I was there. Yes, they did do a risk assessment, so they did follow the procedures in ensuring that a risk assessment was done, which people always say sometimes is a paperwork to sort of cover their backs, but it wasn't followed upon. So they did the risk assessment to say this is what can happen, but while I was out there, no one took notice the fact that I was really ill and I was suffering. I have contacted Erwin Mitchell lawyers who deal with claims for military, and they're having a look at it at the moment. So I'm not sure where they are at with. I'll chase up, but I did speak to someone to find out, because one of the things that for me is because of the pension scheme that I'm on, I'm not pensionable until my 18-year point. So by the time I leave the military, I would have done 16 years. I've touched base with the Forces Pension Society, who said that I won't get a pension because I've not done the full time. But I do believe that for the fact that I became so ill whilst on deployment, which has contributed to me leaving, I do believe that I should get a pension. So that's something else that I'm also looking into as well.
Thank you, Claudine. Ed, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Brendan, thank you. Really good observations. I'm going to come back from two perspectives. One, sort of Brian, dad of Harry, and the sort of human rights bit, and the other, commanding officer of a regiment. Absolutely sickened to hear some of the stuff that Claudine talked about, and I am a person who does those risk assessments for people, and therefore and take that very serious responsibility, well, seriously. So, but the first one, so my son's human rights. Absolutely. So those are the centre of gravity of all of the arguments that we have. You're right. It's not about money. It's not about which council, what council. It's not about what piece of paper has been sealed with wax by whatever court. It's about what Harry needs, where and when. So that's the centre of gravity of all of the arguments, complaints, discussions, emails, blah blah blah. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a key aspect. And when you talk about consistency of care between service and the real world, as I would call it, but equally moving around different parts of the world, the country, county, that, or even organisation, you know, if it's NHS, social services, education, all those bits that are covered by the covenant. There's just too much. I talked about it earlier. There's too much information for everyone to read, which perhaps trickles into Claudine's issue in Kenya. But yeah, the consistency of care is key, and the fact that you're all on this call, listening, nodding, thinking, wondering, what can my organisation do? What can I do? How does this fit into what we do? That's what matters to me. And then sort of onto sort of Claudine's, not necessarily Claudine's case, but you know, as a commanding officer, it is my job to ensure all of my soldiers are safe when we do what we do. And part of that is the risk assessment process that was discussed. And I guess that's where I link it into what I just said to Brendan about his first part of the question, in that there's just too much stuff, paperwork, process for the resource, and in this case, people, time to follow up on and act upon. There's also an element of arrogance. You know, the officer needs to do a recce. That's yeah. Anyway, wouldn't happen in my regiment. I'd like to think, but people have to implement these policies, and people don't know about them. You know, Up Courage. It's on the front page of the defence SharePoint every so often, but every soldier doesn't read everything because they can't, because they don't have access. Someone asked me earlier about, you know, I'm well informed and I'm having trouble. So how does Private Smith in A Company of the Black Watch, which doesn't exist anymore, 3 Scots, sorry, know about this stuff? And quite frankly, it's got to be about people, communication, things like this, people caring and people talking. Because we can write as much as we want in policy, guidance, law, but people have got to execute it. People have got to talk about it, and people have got to want to help each other. Just be human, I guess. And then just a little, Claudine, we can talk later if you want about the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme.
Yes, thank you. That would be brilliant. Yeah.
No worries. Thanks, Brendan. Really good question.
Yeah, really good question. Any other questions for anybody from our audience? And I see Mandy has posted in the chat there some links to things like the Carers Trust. So Ed mentions, you know, linking in with the carers centres, finding out who's doing the local carers assessments. If you go on that website, you can put your postcode in and find your local carers centre. That's really important. And a good report there, Mandy's just posted that the RBL did about unpaid carers in the armed forces community. I would really, really urge people to have a read of that. That came out last year. Anything people would like to add? I would just like to say what a fantastic session, and even better that, you know, we've given our speakers time to talk. I think it's been amazing. I can't thank you enough, Claudine and Ed. It's been brilliant. Anyone here who's enjoyed it, let your colleagues know. We're going to post this on our website so that people can access it afterwards. And also Claudine and Ed have agreed that they would share their presentations, which is very generous of them. But yeah, a heartfelt thank you from us at the Armed Forces Network and all of you here today. As Ed said, it shows you're interested, you care, and you know, you're looking to make a difference to improve the support we can offer. So thank you, everybody, and hope to see you in the near future at another of our online sessions. So all the best. Take care, folks.
Can I just quickly add? Sorry. I
Yeah.
think Claudine mentioned pension, and that's one of the things we also look into as well. As you know, DWP, we look at your earnings, everything else included. So, you know, when it comes to pension and stuff like that, we are happy to take a look. Make sure you're getting your entitlement, especially in AFEEP, and as a, you know, Lieutenant Colonel just mentioned your AFCS. We also look at that. So we just try and hold the DWP accountable as part of the AFC community, just to make sure that every serving veterans, and when they're leaving, they get what they're entitled to. And obviously, we make sure that they're not at what we call major disadvantage when you come onto the civilian street. So yeah, just send us an email, and we'll help you take a look and see what you can do when you come out the military.
Thank you very much. I'll do so.
Thank you,
No
Larval. And a couple of questions there. DWP contact for the Canterbury, Kent area. Nicola, please get in touch. We can provide you with that info. I just wanted to give a shout out to the wonderful Suffolk Carers Centre, who have a dedicated Armed Forces Families and Carers service. So there are a few of those around the country, not many, but please find out what's on offer locally, because, you know, specialist services like that are just invaluable. So that's brilliant. Oh, somebody's put there, Mel Cooper is the AFC for Canterbury. Thank you, Fiona, for that. So folks, go and get 10 minutes break before you go on to whatever it is you've got coming for the rest of the day. But all the best to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.